Putting on personal protective equipment (PPE) under field conditions. Personal protective equipment (PPE) box content. Autoclave bags. Liquid-resistant overall. Liquid-tight disposable protective coats. Overshoes. A set of nitrile gloves, primary gloves. Another set of latex overgloves, secondary gloves. FFP3 respiration masks. Protective goggles. A set of torch lamps and headlamps to enable the examiner's operation in the dark, such as sampling in the caves or during night hours. Surgical mask. Additional consumables necessary for sample collection under high biosecurity conditions include appropriate proven disinfectant. The disinfectant should be preferably in powder bags in order to prevent spilling out the liquid concentrates. Additionally, the suitcase contains spraying bottle and disposable wipes. The equipment and consumables for the main examiner include nitrile gloves, latex overgloves, FFP3 respiration masks, protective goggles, overall, overshoes, surgical mask to cover the free exposed area of the examiner, liquid-tight disposable protective coat, adhesive tape. The equipment and consumables for the assistant include nitrile gloves, latex overgloves, FFP3 respiration masks, protective goggles, overall, overshoes. The consumables used for decontamination include water container for 20 liters, water source, disinfectant, preferably power bags, spraying bottle, disposable wipes, plastic underlay, autoclave bags. The orange biosecurity suitcase should be at least 3 meters away from the contamination area, preferably more. Team bodywork with checklist. In order to enable maximum biosecurity and prevent any accidental infection of the staff involved in sampling, packaging, and submission of samples, the procedure for putting on and removal of the personal protective equipment should be supervised and supported by the assistant in the form of a checklist. The assistant should also keep 3-meter distance from the infectious work area. Procedure of putting on the personal protective equipment. Before the start of putting on the personal protective equipment, both the examiner and the assistant should take off any personal jewelry, watches, and any other foreign objects from the body and wear a working suit. Put on the nitrile gloves. Put on the FFP3 mask on the face, followed by pressing the edges of the mask around the nose in order to tighten the edges to the skin of the examiner. Put on the protective goggles. Put on and close the overall. Care should be taken on the size of the overall. The hood should cover the protective goggles. During bending down, the hair should not slip out of the hood. The nitrile gloves should be fixed under the sleeve using adhesive tape. Put on the overshoes. Put on the overgloves and fix them to the sleeves of the overall from the upper and the lower side. Prepare and put on the surgical mouth-nose mask in a way to cover the uncovered areas of skin on the face. The area of the surgical mouth-nose mask, which is covering the ventilation valves of the FFP3 mask, must be removed. The hood of the overall should be fixed on the outer side of the protective goggles. Put on the liquid-tight disposable protective coat. Pull the edges of the gloves over the disposable liquid coat. Procedure for sample collection and packaging under field conditions. Guidelines for specimen transport. A. Triple packaging. Primary container with a species. Watertight, leak-proof, absorbent material around. Secondary container. Watertight, leak-proof. Labels. Tertiary container. Protecting against water. Infectious substance label. Receiver information into a side bag. Shipper information. Packages must bear UN specification mark. Prior to sampling, examine the animal corpse. Place the animal corpse on the plastic underlay. Prepare disinfected instruments and take tissue samples. Place the samples in primary sealed package with clean outer surface. Disinfect the gloves. Remove the used gloves. Put on the new pair of gloves. Disinfect and clean the package. Label the package. Wrap the package in paper and plastic. Pad inside secondary durable hard plastic container. Disinfect the secondary container. Clear the secondary container. Label the secondary container. Place container in the tertiary box for shipment. Label the box appropriately. Disinfect used instruments. Procedure for removal of the protective equipment, PPE, from the examiner under field conditions. Before starting the removal of the personal protective equipment, the assistant should prepare the appropriate disinfectant solutions and the equipment required for the removal. This includes the following. Step 1. Prepare the disinfectant solution, bleach, in the appropriate concentration. In the example, the disinfection powder should be dissolved to 0.5% final solution. This requires chlorine tablets dissolved in 4 liters of water, following manufacturer's instructions. The solution should be mixed until fully dissolved in the water. The disinfectant should be freshly prepared prior to use. Step 2. At least 1 liter of the disinfectant solution should be immediately transferred to the spraying bottle for personal disinfection. Step 3. The examiner should put the container with the disinfectant on the plastic underlays and step on the plastic underlays himself or herself. The decontamination assistant should protect himself or herself by wearing nitrile gloves, nitrile latex overgloves, FFP3 protective mask, goggles, overall, overshoes, 2 waterproof underpads. Team bodywork with checklist. An additional security assistant, observer, controls whether the PPE is removed correctly. The observer keeps a distance of 3 meters to doctors and nurses who come from the area of risk, as well as from the decontamination assistant. His task is to monitor and to guide the correct procedure on the removing of the PPE using a checklist. Prepare a final 0.5% disinfection solution, bleach, using chlorine tablets in 4 liters of water, following manufacturer's instructions. Fill the spraying bottle with 1 liter of the solution for personal disinfection by spraying. Prepare 2 plastic bags to serve as disposal container. In order to reduce the risk of accidental dissemination of highly contagious pathogens, the removal of the personal protective equipment should be performed on a covered surface. For this purpose, liquid-tight plastic underlays are used. Designated area should be away from working area to minimize the risk of contamination. Prepare plastic or nylon as a base. Removal of the personal protective equipment, PPE, from the examiner. The examiner should thoroughly disinfect his gloves in the container with the disinfectant. Any organic leftover should be removed from the gloves and left in the disinfectant. The assistant should disinfect the liquid-tight disposable protective coat by spraying all over the whole surface of the coat, without spraying the area of the head. The examiner should stay on the spot for 5 minutes to enable disinfection. The assistant should open the liquid-tight disposable protective coat from the backside. The liquid-tight disposable protective coat should be removed by rolling out from the inner to the outer side of the coat, touching only the inner side of the coat. The assistant should put the liquid-tight disposable protective coat in the disposal bag. The assistant should disinfect his or her gloves into the disinfectant canister. The examiner should disinfect his or her gloves into the disinfected canister. The assistant should disinfect the overall of the examiner by spraying all over the surface of the coat. The area of the head should not be disinfected. The examiner should stay on the spot for 5 minutes to enable disinfection. The assistant should carefully remove the surgical mouth-nose mask manually or using the disposable scissors. If used, the disposable scissors should be thrown into the autoclave bags. The assistant places the surgical mouth-nose mask into the disposal container and disinfects his or her gloves. The examiner removes the outer latex gloves by pulling always the outer surface of the gloves and rolling them out of the hand. The latex gloves should be immediately placed into the disposal container, bag. The examiner should disinfect the inner nitrile gloves in the disinfectant container. The examiner releases the laces of the overshoes. The examiner rolls out the overall protective coat, always touching the inner side of the coat. The overall protective coat should be disposed in the waste container, bag. The examiner should disinfect his or her gloves in the disinfectant canister. The examiner carefully removes the safety goggles. The examiner should not touch the possibly contaminated outer surface of the goggles, but touch the goggles at the previously covered edges. The protective goggles should be thrown in the autoclave bag after removal. The examiner should remove the FFP3 mask. The FFP3 mask should be thrown into the disposal container bag. The examiner should disinfect his or her gloves in the disinfectant canister. The examiner should remove the gloves by rolling from the outer side of the glove. The latex gloves should be immediately placed into the disposal container bag.